Hi there. This isn't my usual content, but I want to talk about something that I think is really interesting and I don't hear it mentioned much, and that is aphantasia, particularly as it relates to readers and writers. So, if you're not sure what aphantasia is, let's do a little exercise. I want you to close your eyes and I want you to visualize an apple. Just picture that apple, let it come into your mind, whether that's all at once or it kind of slowly sort of builds. Let that apple materialize in your mind's eye. Now, as it's happening, I want you to start to notice a few things. What color is the apple? Is it green, pink, red, yellow, somewhere in between? Where is it in relative space? Is it just kind of floating there in the air? Is it on a table, in a basket, on a tree, whatever? How clearly can you see the apple? Can you pick it up and turn it around and see it from all sides? Or is it kind of more vague, maybe a little 2D, maybe it's in black and white? If you're there going, I don't see anything, me neither. And that's aphantasia. Being able to visualize things in your mind, like many other things, falls on a spectrum. Most people have some kind of ability to visualize. People with hyperphantasia can imagine things so clearly that apparently it can be challenging for them to differentiate between their imagination and real life, almost like a hallucination, I've heard it described. And on the other side, there's aphantasia, where people have no voluntary visualization at all. That means no pictures in your head, no visual imagination, no memories, no visual memories. And it turns out when people tell you to visualize, they're not being figurative. They mean that literally. Have you ever done a guided meditation or a manifestation exercise? Visualize yourself on a calming beach. Picture a glorious sunset. Until a few years ago, I didn't understand that when people said that, they meant it. They're not kidding. They're just going on the assumption that everyone has a visual imagination, that everyone can see pictures in their head. I can't. I never could. I close my eyes and it's nothing but black. This is apparently a neurodivergence. Most people can see something in their head. Who knew? Interestingly, there's also a spectrum within aphantasia. There are some people with aphantasia who don't have visual dreams. They might have sounds or feelings, or they might hear something, or they might have a synesthesia where they can feel a color, but they can't actually see it. Others, like me, have extremely vivid dreams so real that you don't realize you're dreaming until you wake up and you're like, oh my God, that was a dream. The key is that people with aphantasia can't see those things on demand. So when my brain is sleeping, I get fully immersive movies with all five senses engaged. But when my brain is awake, nothing. I got no pictures. Why do I want to talk about this? If you're new here, or if you didn't know, I'm a writer. Ta-da! And I'm a fantasy writer. And I've heard it said that being a writer is like having a fully cinematic experience inside your head, and then you have to write it down so that other people can see exactly what you're seeing. That person clearly has some kind of aphantasia ability. And apparently most people do. So they make the assumption that it's a universal thing that everyone can do, and it's not. So why does that matter? As a fantasy writer, I'm creating worlds, I'm creating characters, I'm describing settings, and I can't see any of it at all. So you might be wondering, how does your imagination work if you don't have pictures? As a person with aphantasia, instead of pictures, what I have are concepts. So for example, I just finished rereading The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss for the 17th time. So if you describe Quoth to me, he's got fair skin and true red, flame red hair and green eyes that change color depending on his mood. So they could be anywhere from a new spring, sort of bright sap green, to a dark stormy green, or anywhere in between. I can't see him. But I have a concept of those things. I know what colors look like. I am a sighted person when my eyes are open. And I can hold the concept of those things even though I can't see them. And if you're used to having a visual imagination, this is going to seem really weird to you. But if your experience is more like mine, you may be going, yes, yes, that's exactly how it works. Or maybe you're somewhere in between. But if you're starting to feel bad for me that I have no pictures in my head, don't. I realize that I may lose some of you here, but hear me out. I think that it's possible that being a person with aphantasia and being a fantasy writer, not only are those things not mutually exclusive, they may actually be an advantageous combination. It might actually be a good thing to not be able to see things in your head when you're writing. Okay, bold argument. Hear me out. Because I cannot see up here, I rely on giving you other cues. And this is something I've always gotten feedback on in my writing. It's so atmospheric. I can really feel it. I can smell it. I can hear it. I feel like I'm there. That's because I'm not relying solely on a description of what it looks like. The way I approach writing, even in description, is to give you the bare minimum of what something looks like. It's just enough for you to get the sense of what you need to know so that you can move on with whatever's going on in the story. Instead of visuals, I focus on atmosphere and feelings. So I'm going to give you cues about the sound. I'm going to give you what smells are on the air and the quality of that air. So let's say you're at a carnival, right? You've got the signs creaking in the breeze and the buzz of the electric lights. You've got the smells of apples and leaf mold and smoke and sugar. And you've got the chirp of night insects as the bright, clear day fuzzes into twilight. None of that is visual, or very little of it is visual, but it gives you what you need to create your own visual and put yourself there. And then you also get the sounds in the sense it's more immersive. And that's the advantage of writing away from just the visual. If you want to paint a picture, take a photo. There are ways that you can make a picture that, people can take a story from. But I think that because most people and most writers do have the ability to visualize things in their mind's eye and they want to share that with you, that's where they go, right? That's what they depend on. They really go heavy on what it looks like, whether it's a person or a dress or a landscape or a dragon. When you're telling a story, you're doing a pretty good job if you can translate that movie in your head so that other people can see what you're seeing. But you're doing an excellent job if you can make them feel. Do they know what it's like to stand next to that dragon, to feel the heat coming off of its skin and the humid roar of its breathing, to smell the carrion on its breath and the trembling in their own knees and bladder? What does the dragon look like? You decide. So how do you recognize characters if you can't see mental pictures of them? For me, it all comes in concepts. Like I said, I know what colors look like. So to go back to the Kvothe example, if you put a bunch of dudes with lutes in a row and you say to me, point out the one that's Kvothe, I'm going to point to the one with red hair and green eyes and probably some kind of a shit-eating grin on his face. Just saying. My sense of a character lives in this complex web of words and concepts and feelings, everything that makes an impression without the actual image, if that makes sense. And there's actually an interesting connection between aphantasia and a lack of memory, specifically early childhood memory. So when you're a kid, you don't have words, right? You just don't know any yet. But unless you're born with some variety of visual impairment, your eyes work within a few days of birth. You're just, boom, you're out there, you're seeing. And if you have visual recall and visual memory, those things that you see become memories. Until you have words, your memories depend on those images because they're all you have. But what if you don't even have that? My earliest memories that are actually mine and not just stories passed down about stuff that I did or said are from elementary school. Lots of them are feelings or memories of like colors that were involved in something, conceptually, not visually. I remember one time in elementary school, I tried out for like a dance group and it wasn't anything formal. I think it was for like a talent show or something. And I remember that a lot of the girls had on like that classic late 80s, early 90s combination of like purple and teal and pink. That I remember. Who those girls were, how many there were, what they looked like, don't remember. I just remember like the colors because they all were wearing them. So, some of my memories are even spatial. I can remember my 4th grade classroom The door was sort of on the very right, so you would come in and most of the classroom was like this way. And there were, desks and the windows were on that side. And I remember that if you went into the door and directly hard left in the back corner of that room behind the teacher's, I think the teacher's desk was there. I honestly don't even remember where that was, but the bookcase was in that back corner. So even from a young age, I had my priorities straight. And that's a spatial memory, but I don't know what that bookcase looked like. Don't remember. I don't remember how many shelves it had. I don't remember most of the books that were on it, unless it was a book that I read over and over because I loved. There was a lot of like Shel Silverstein there. I remember Where the Sidewalk Ends being one of my favorites, and or like Where the Wild Things Are, that was there too. Apart from that, there's nothing, and none of it is visual. It's just like little bits and pieces. I don't see any of it. So what do I remember? I'm good at remembering what people said. I'm good at remembering how I felt. Like I said, I tend to have those little bits and pieces of things, but they're not visual. It's like this web of associations and connections. And as I've gotten older and as I've gotten more words, that web becomes more robust and my memories become more intense because I have more that I can like bounce them off of. I'm also really good at remembering sounds. I've always been able to memorize entire movies. When I was in children's theater, I would memorize the entire play, not just my lines, but everybody's lines and all of the cues and all of the light cues. And people would be like, how do you do that? Excuse the change in the light. This is editing, Leela. I realized that I didn't tell you how I memorized those plays. So what I would do is I would get my cassette tape recorder, ask your parents if you don't know what that is, and I would read the entire script of the play. Everybody's lines, timing, inflection, everything. And then I would just listen to it over and over and over again. And I had it, I would memorize it. And that's how I knew my own lines and everybody else's and all the stage directions too. I can't read music, but I only have to hear a melody 2 or 3 times to memorize it. And to this day, I can sing songs that I have not sung in 20 years, often more than one vocal part, including songs in other languages. So it's like, I keep those things in a way that I don't keep anything visual. It's just like any other sense, right? When it doesn't work as well, your brain is kind of forced to figure another way of doing it. Mine manifests in associations and connections, like I said. But despite all of that, despite not having that visual ability, I've always loved to read. So aphantasia is a real thing, and I have it, if one can be said to have aphantasia. And my point here is that you don't need to be able to visualize things in order to read and love reading. And you don't need to be able to visualize things in order to write and love writing. You just process those stories in a different way. And I can't really describe it better than that because I don't know how other people do it. I mean, I'm so jealous of people who are out there. They're just out there. They're out there in the world right now with pictures, actual pictures in their actual heads of characters that I love. But I've never seen them. I would sell my soul for Daniel Tabor Arlington III, but I can't see him in my head, right? Like, that's one reason that I love fan art so much and why I've commissioned artists and used AI to create pictures of my own OCs. I wrote them. I know them inside out. I can tell you what they look like, but until somebody else makes art of them, I can't actually see them. So I would love to know about your experience. Where on the Aphantasia spectrum are you? Do you love to read? Do you love to write? And how does your unique brain affect how you experience a story or how you choose to write one? I would love to hear about it. Please, please, please leave me comments. Let's talk about it. I want to know what your experience is like. And I'm going to link some resources too about aphantasia if you're interested in learning more. Thank you so much for coming along with me on this little ramble. This isn't my usual content, but if you would like to have more like this, let me know. I would love to talk about this more with you, but I don't want to bore anybody. So if you made it this far, thank you so much, and I'll see you again soon.